Misty history. The Mexican-American War. Battle of Buena Vista. Mexico, after gaining their independence from Spain in 1821, struggled through a long period of instability, economic collapse, and civil war. Was the Mexican-American War a land grab? Possibly. But let's look first at Buena Vista, the battle about which many ask, what might have been. When Spain fell, Mexico went from a monarchy to a dictatorship. The economy tanked. There was an invasion by France. Mexico's generals tried to hold things together, but to describe Mexico as unstable, that is an understatement. This is General Antonio López de Santa Anna, the melodramatic, on-again off-again dictator of Mexico. During the Texas Revolt back in 1835-36, Santa Anna commanded the Mexican army. Remember the Alamo? That slaughter involved some of Santa Anna's troops. In the end, however, he and his army were forced to surrender to the Texans and their commander, Sam Houston. He even signed a treaty, recognizing Texas's independence, with the Rio Grande as the border. Later Santa Anna claimed he signed the treaty under duress. For more on this, watch the Misty history video, The Texas Revolt and the Battle of the Alamo. That was then. This is 11 years later, 1847. In this war, against the United States, Mexico lost the first 3 battles. Now, Santa Anna was taking charge. Santa Anna was worried that the United States would attack while he was still getting his army together. To slow the Yankees down and make it more difficult for them, he ordered his cavalry to destroy all the water sources, such as wells and water tanks, along the American supposed route of attack. General Zachary Taylor, nicknamed Rough and Ready, had tremendous personal courage. He inspired his men with his battlefield presence and fearlessness in combat. He was the victor at the Battle of Monterrey. Taylor was elected the 12th President of the United States in 1848. In Washington, President James Polk and his top military leader, General Winfield Scott, planned a new theater of operations, Veracruz/Mexico City. They reassigned 2/3 of Taylor's troops to the new theater. That left Taylor with just 1,000 men. Taylor ordered General John Wool to come from Chihuahua to reinforce him in Monterrey. Wool brought with him 350 wagons. General Wool also brought 400,000 rifle cartridges, made with oxidizing paper, hundreds of rounds of artillery ammunition, including grape shot, spherical shot and canister shot, provisions for 55 days, and his 3,400-man army. Compare that with Mexico. Mexico was essentially bankrupt at this point. The government could not afford shoes for their troops. They needed more wagons. They would go 280 miles on starvation rations. And recently all the sources of water along the route were destroyed by their own cavalry. So yes, after Santa Anna heard about Taylor's shrunken army, he decided to go north and fight. Over 21,000 soldiers started north with Santa Anna. Just 15,000 were able to complete the 22-day march. They arrived thirsty and half-starved. General Taylor received word that the Mexican army was coming. He designated Wool to be the battlefield commander. The U.S. would play defense. Santa Anna was on the attack. Here are the opening positions of the two armies. This is the Mexican line. This is the U.S. line. The U.S. is outnumbered 4-1. But it was the Americans who decided on which terrain to fight, and the terrain they chose was made for defense. This is the Saltillo Road. This is a choke point, a mere 40 feet wide. On one side deep gullies and ravines. On the other, cliffs 50 feet high. Ahead, American artillery. Santa Anna decided to first test the American left flank with infantry and cavalry. On the right flank, any attack along the Saltillo Road was doomed by the topography. On day 1, the Mexicans pushed hard on the American left. The Americans were forced into a fighting withdrawal. A lieutenant reported to General Taylor, "Sir, our left flank is collapsing." The ever-calm Taylor responded, "Lieutenant, I know the left is collapsing, but the troops do not know that. Let's give them a chance to show what they can do." It turns out they did well enough to buy the defense a little extra time. Later that same morning of day 1, a squadron of mounted lancers attempted to turn the far left of the U.S. line. Military doctrine required the battlefield commander to keep troops in reserve, and to commit those reserves at the critical point of the battle. General Wool calculated this was the critical moment. He committed his reserve cavalry company. Captain Steen and his cavalry attacked. They were armed with their cavalry sword and 2 pistols. On the center of the line, Taylor spoke to his artillery commander these famous words, "A little more grape, Captain Bragg." As the Mexican lancers were being turned away on the far left, another company of mounted lancers attacked closer to the center. They were repulsed by the 1st Mississippi and 3rd Indiana Infantry Regiments. Captain Steen had the lancers on the run. Colonel Jefferson Davis, seeing this, raced over to cut off their retreat. The lancers were able to fight their way past the 1st Mississippi, but, to escape the riflemen's line of fire, the Mexicans sought cover in a ravine, only to realize that they were trapped by the topography. Under a white flag, the lancers surrendered. Or so everyone thought. But it was a fake-out. The trapped men used the pause in fighting as an opportunity to scurry back to their own line. On day 2, Santa Anna launched the final attack. He was going all in, against the center of the weakened American line. Just as before on the right flank, the American artillery tore large holes in the massed Mexican columns. We illustrated for you in the Battle of Monterrey the reasons for America's technically superior weapons, and their increased lethality. Here they proved critical. However, the sheer number of Santa Anna's troops overcame the Americans. That evening, as the Americans gathered their wounded, they knew they could not withstand another attack, like the attack they survived that day. It's true that Santa Anna had the Americans on the ropes. But he had decided that his own troops had done all that they could do. Santa Anna would retire from the field and claim victory on the way out. That's typical Santa Anna. The greatest spin doctor of his time. He was eloquent and melodramatic. He was egotistical. Santa Anna was a brilliant, university-educated man raised to be a leader. An officer of the Royal Army who fought to preserve the crown, until he saw more opportunity in joining the revolt. Santa Anna, his nationalist rhetoric, his enthusiasm, and his personal charisma, would continue to carry him from one defeat to the next. We will see this again when we look at the battle for his hometown, Veracruz. Now, let's ask the question, was the Mexican-American War a land grab? Consider this. The Pacific Islanders, who first landed here, and Siberian Asians, did not worry about who owned the land. These two continents, before these explorers from Asia arrived, had absolutely no human life. There was an awful lot of land. But sooner or later, families argue, and tribes fight. Mayans fought Aztecs, and Incas ruled by tyranny, That's just the way it was. That's the way the New World evolved. Now imagine Queen Isabella of Spain, claiming huge swaths of these continents, both north and south. The big naval powers of the age had arrived, but none made a bigger footprint in the New World than Spain. The land in the center of this map belonged to Spain, but Spain traded it to France. France then sold it to the US in 1803. President Thomas Jefferson assigned Captains Lewis and Clark the mission of finding out what the Louisiana Purchase actually purchased. Be sure to look for our videos on the Lewis and Clark expedition and the California Gold Rush. The Oregon Trail. You see here that the Oregon Country, first mapped by Lewis and Clark, was now being claimed by Great Britain, Russia, Spain and the US. 4 nations claiming the same territory. By 1850, tens of thousands of settlers, farmers, miners and their families had traveled the Oregon Trail. President Polk had settled the US-Canadian border with Britain. The southern border, with Alta California, was settled in the 1819 Adams-Onis Treaty. That treaty also ceded Florida and the Louisiana Gulf Coast to the United States. Was the Mexican-American War a land grab? It's complicated. Complication 1. New Spain had paid American settlers to come to Coahuila and Tejas, and this policy was continued by the newly independent Mexico. Stephen F. Austin arrived with the first 300 families and their slaves in 1822. In 1829 the Mexican government abolished slavery. The Anglo-Mexicans seceded from Mexico. They wanted their slaves. Complication 2. Mexico wanted to limit new settlement further north than expected. Santa Anna had agreed to independence for Texas, but the border he now claimed was the Nueces River, not the Rio Grande. So there you go. 2 problems, slavery and boundary. President James Polk tried to negotiate with Mexico. The difficulty was that there was no Mexican government stable enough to negotiate with. The Mexican military had changed leaders 52 times in the last 25 years. That's a different leader every 6 months. 8 of those times, it was Santa Anna who the military appointed as the president for the moment. The US-Canadian border was resolved peacefully. The line between the United States and Mexico should also have been a negotiated settlement. This is a war that should never have been fought.